This video is brought to you by Chubbies. Get 20% off at chubbyshorts.com with the code DAN20 and stay tuned after the video for more info. Hello everybody and welcome to my spoiler review for Season 1 of Daredevil Born Again, which wrapped up just a couple days ago over on Disney+. Now, as I just said, it is a spoiler review, so if you haven't seen all of Season 1 yet, you should go watch it and go finish it, whatever you need to do, and then come back because we're going to dive right into what actually happened. I've already done a review for the first 2 episodes, and when we left things off here on the channel, I'd said that I generally enjoyed the first couple of episodes and that I was curious to see where the show was going to go from here and if we were going to be able to see any of the seams of where they went in and retooled the show and reshot some stuff, kind of did a different concept. And looking at the whole season now, I think that I can say that I definitely do see the seams when we get to the final 2 episodes of the show, which I think were a very stark difference from where we started the show, and particularly from the middle part of the season. When you look at the season as a whole, I could definitely tell that at some point, the idea for the show was to be a little bit more self-contained or to have arcs that were maybe 1 or 2 episodes long, because you had the Hector Ayala arc with the whole White Tiger stuff. You had the stuff with Muse, the serial killer that was menacing the city. There was even a bottle episode, kind of a one-off, where Matt was in the bank during the bank heist. And I think that all of those stories could have been expanded to maybe take up a whole season or half of a season, except for the kind of bottle episode one. But that's just not how the structure of the show worked. There was, of course, an overarching structure about Wilson Fisk and Matt Murdock and Kingpin versus Daredevil. And I think that when you look at the kind of mini arcs that the show had, they really all centered around the same thing, which is Matt going to go back to being Daredevil again? Which is a good season-long question, but it felt like we kind of repeated that question a couple of different times. Looking at the White Tiger story, I really wish that they could have figured out a way to expand that a bit more, because I liked Camar de los Reyes' performance as White Tiger, and I think the show could have done more to establish him in the mythology of the show, to give that character more room to breathe. I mean, when you look at episode 3, it starts with him on trial for murder, and it ends with him being killed by a member of what would turn out to be eventually part of Kingpin's anti-vigilante task force. But you cover so much ground in that episode. They did try to extend that into the Muse storyline a bit by having his niece get involved with that, but that felt a little bit forced. And this is kind of a microcosm of what I thought about everything except for the bigger Daredevil Kingpin story, which is that it did all seem to be kind of squeezed to fit into this season. But luckily for the season overall, at least those stories were compelling, even if they maybe weren't put together as nicely as they could have been. Similarly, I think that the Muse story could have been a season-long arc. He was a creepy villain, and Hunter Doohan did well with what he was given, but he goes from being identified as a serial killer to being off the show in 2 episodes. And you did have these little pieces earlier in the season where they hinted at him, but the bulk of his story was basically 2 episodes long. And this was a character who I think could have been given a lot more room to breathe, who didn't really tie into the overall structure of the season that much. I don't know if kind of connecting him to the beginning part of the season was done retroactively again as they were trying to retool the story. But I really liked that character, and I wish we could have spent more time with him. But it wasn't terrible, and I especially liked that confrontation, that final confrontation in the psychiatrist's office between Daredevil and Muse. I thought that it was a good fight scene, and that's something that's always helped this show across streaming networks, across seasons, is that they've always been able to do the action very well. The performances are always done very well. And so that at least gives the show a center or a core that can help to make up for maybe some other places where it's not doing as well. I think you felt the squeeze a little bit with some of these supporting characters as well. Rebecca, I thought, started out as a really strong love interest for Matt. There was a lot of chemistry there, but eventually we kind of got into the same territory of him splitting his life back and forth, and she was pretty much sidelined for particularly the season finale. It seems like they're going to try to keep her in the mix because she's now working for Kingpin / Fisk. Is she part of this resistance? Is she kind of on her own side now? BB Urick was a character who I thought they mainly kept alive through these different newsreels and stuff, and there was this flirting with, her being kind of bought off by Fisk, but also working with the commissioner, but then the commissioner is gone. That's a character I think maybe had more to do in the original iteration of the story. And then Michael Gandolfini's character, Daniel Blake, I think he kind of disappeared for a lot of the middle of the season, but he came on strong at the end when he became Kingpin's political enforcer. And more than any of the other supporting characters that they introduced this season, I think this character is the one that has the most potential because they opened up a lot of new doors, a lot of new possibilities for him. Episode 5, I think, was maybe the closest to what the original intention of the show was. It had that darkness at the edge, but it was a little bit more MCU-ified. We had a big role for Yusuf Khan, Kamala Khan's dad. It was the kind of MCU inclusion that I was expecting, honestly, more of in this series. Not really crucial to the story, but it's there in order to remind the audience that we are part of an extended universe. And I actually liked that episode quite a bit on its own. It did feel like a bit of an orphan in the middle of the series, but like I was saying before, I think what kept this thing afloat until it really found its footing is that these individual stories still landed mostly on their own. But what worked best for this season is what I think has always worked best for this iteration of Daredevil, which is this conflict between Matt Murdock and Wilson Fisk, Daredevil and Kingpin. And added to that this season, you had not only the external conflict between those two characters, but the internal conflict between themselves and what they want for the future. They're both trying to live a different life, to suppress this inner urge to be the person that they honestly know that they are inside. And then those last two episodes where they both succumbed to that inner darkness, that's when the show really, I think, kicked into high gear and was some of the best Daredevil that we've seen, and that even goes back to the Netflix days. In episode 8, we had the confrontation between Matt and Fisk at the Black and White Ball after Matt gives up on fighting crime the legitimate way. I really liked what Matt said to his partner at the firm, where he said, you know what, I don't even feel like we're doing any good. I feel like we're babysitting chaos. That really distilled the disillusionment that he had for the entire season. And then we have this big party in the penultimate episode. It's a great TV show way to get most of our main characters in a room together. And I like the way that they staged it. I liked the dance floor. I liked that you had Kingpin saying things in a way that he knows only Matt can hear. Matt figuring out that it was Vanessa who put out the hit on Foggy and not Kingpin. You bring Bullseye back into the mix. This all really worked well. And if you were going to go back, I think if Marvel could go back and reconceive this show from the beginning, then there are things like the mystery behind Foggy's death that I think could have been peppered into the middle of the season instead of introduced in episode 1 and then not really brought back up again until these last couple of episodes. It did feel a bit rushed to get to where we were, but once we got there, I think that it was really, really good. Now, I'm still not entirely sold on Matt taking a bullet for Kingpin. The show tried to explain it a little bit, but that's also kind of what we know about Charlie Cox in the role as Matt Murdock, which is that he will literally and figuratively take the bullet at his own expense in the interest of doing good or doing the right thing. And I thought it set up a great season finale as Fisk pushes New York City over the edge by causing a blackout, which allows his anti-vigilante task force to take control of the streets. Now, I've seen some feedback from people that think that it was too on the nose, that the concept of taking over the media and assembling your own personal police force and getting people in line by acting, with an iron fist is too close to what people are worried about with modern day, with current events here in the United States. I honestly think the fact that a lot of folks might be worried about a comic book supervillains plan being too close to what might actually be happening in the world says a lot more about our world and a lot less about the MCU. We also got the return of Jon Bernthal as the Punisher, and the brutality of this show in the last couple of episodes, I think, really served him well, especially as he slaughtered those task force members who had co-opted his insignia. I think that Jon Bernthal remains a great fit for this character, and they already have reportedly more Punisher stuff that's in the pipeline. So I'm glad that they were able to get him back in the show and also have the show by that time kind of have taken a turn that doesn't water that character down. Speaking of brutality, Kingpin's murder of the police commissioner wasn't just one of the most brutal things I've seen Vincent D'Onofrio do in this role. It's one of the most brutal things I think I've ever seen on television. And that scene alone, if you look at the tone of the show when it started, which was still gritty, especially that first episode, which was reportedly kind of reshot, but the tone in the middle of the show as well, and then look at where we are in the finale, it's very clear to me what the change in creative direction was. It was darker, it was grittier, it was more brutal. It was really to take this version of Daredevil and make it much, much closer to what we got on Netflix before they made the move over to Disney+. And I think that this was a positive for the show. Now, it also didn't stand out too much because the season was also about this descent back into brutality for Kingpin. So it wasn't like he was committing these kinds of acts and we didn't see that stuff throughout the rest of the season. But to have that, and I mean, I can't even show a still of it. I think this video would get demonetized immediately. That was such an announcement that the Kingpin that we know is back and he's more powerful than ever. And it was so effective the way that they chose to do that. I can, and so far I largely have blamed this season for being a bit inconsistent with the storylines and meshing everything together and feeling like there was this change in creative direction. But really, when you look at it, when you look at the worst case scenario for a season of TV that was retooled, partially reshot, some people were brought in to replace the original showrunners and some of the people that had crafted what the original version of the show was going to be. This was far from that worst case scenario. Yes, the show did seem to be spinning its wheels at some points, but it wasn't a complete disaster. It wasn't completely disjointed. And when you look at where we got, this season finale, and really episode 8 kind of preceding it, I think was really almost back to peak Daredevil. What I think so many people, including myself, loved when the show first hit the air on Netflix. It was such an escalation from where we started, and it sets up what I think is a really, really interesting season 2. I'm now excited to see where the story goes from here because we have Fisk with more power than he's ever had before. He has his own personal army. We have Matt/Daredevil now building this underground resistance, and I want to know what happens from here. This season felt consequential. It felt like it came to a natural ending point, kind of a break point, and now we're going to go into sort of phase 2 of this conflict. And they were able to land the season so that it felt satisfying, even if it didn't necessarily feel that way all the way through. The stop and start process with this season may have held season 1 back from greatness and made it simply good, but it sets the show up for greatness. And this would not be the first show that had a little bit of difficulty finding its voice and finding its feet in season 1, albeit under different circumstances. One of my favorite shows of all time, Star Trek The Next Generation, took 2 full seasons with a lot more episodes before it finally hit its groove. And if season 2 can carry this momentum on from season 1, then I think that we are really back on track because this show, I think, did build as it went. It wasn't unenjoyable in the middle while it was kind of piecing together what it was going to be. What is the function of a season of television? I think it's to tell a good story and it's to get you excited for the next season. So I'd give the season, maybe a C+, B- on telling a good story, but an A+ as far as getting me excited for what's going to come next. So on my personal scale, when I look at the season in totality, I'm going to give season 1 of Daredevil Born Again, and it's good with a lot of potential for growth in season 2. But what did you think? Did you like this first season? Did you feel that they were kind of trying to find their voice in the middle? Or did you think that it was all one pretty tight story all the way through? Let me know down in the comments below. And before we go, I want to thank the sponsor for this review, Chubbies. It's April, and the last thing you want is to look like the fool who's still dressing for winter. You want an outfit that says, "Come and get me, summer," and Chubbies has every possible option that you can think of. I've been outside a lot lately enjoying the great weather and wearing my pair of original stretch shorts. They're lightweight, they feel great on those warmer days, and they're perfect for playing soccer in the afternoon and hitting up the local brewery afterwards. I'm much better at one of those two things. I'm also a fan of their Friday shirt, which is my go-to for a casual afternoon. And honestly, you deserve a wardrobe upgrade for springtime. And for a limited time, Chubbies is giving fans of the show 20% off your order with my exclusive code DAN20 at chubbyshorts.com. And I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't mention Chubby's classic line swim collection. They're both great looking and feature 4-way stretch fabric that dries quick, so you don't have to walk around the pool or the beach with the dreaded drippy shorts. Whether you're getting dressed for your workday, a workout, or a weekend getaway, Chubbies has you covered. For a limited time, Chubbies is giving fans of the show 20% off your order with my code DAN20 at chubbyshorts.com. That's code DAN20 at chubbyshorts.com. Support the show and tell them that I sent you. Don't blend in with the crowd. Stand out with Chubbies. Thanks to Chubbies for sponsoring this review, and thank you for watching. Be sure to stay tuned right here for more movie news, reviews, box office, and more. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.